How an ordinary fall during a game forever changed the life of one of the NBA's top stars in just a few days. Why did doctors realize too late what had happened? And why was all of America shocked by this story? And why did another basketball player dedicate more than 10 years of his life to his friend, refusing to abandon him at his most difficult moment? Be sure to watch this video to the end, because in the finale, you will find a little-known fact that even far from all NBA fans know. Imagine a young NBA star whom experts called one of the most versatile players of his generation. It seemed that long years of glory, records, and the fight for a championship title lay ahead of him. But just a single play crossed it all out. An ordinary-looking fall during a match did not cause much alarm among either the spectators or the teammates. Maurice Stokes himself got up on his feet and continued playing, as if nothing serious had happened. No one could even imagine that at that very moment, the countdown had already begun, which would change his life forever. Just a few days passed. Just recently, he walked out onto the parquet in front of thousands of fans, and now he could no longer speak normally or move independently. His body was rapidly stopping to obey him. Doctors desperately tried to understand what was happening to one of the league's brightest basketball players, and fans across the country followed the news in horror, not believing that such a thing was even possible. But this story became great not only because of the tragedy that befell Maurice Stokes. It forever went down in the history of sports thanks to the action of another person. When things gradually grew quiet around, when the applause ended and his career was cut short in practically an instant, the one whom almost no one expected to do so stayed by his side. His loyalty, care, and readiness to dedicate long years of his life to his friend would later become an example for the entire sports world. The story of Maurice Stokes is not just a tale about basketball. This is a story about how fragile a human destiny can turn out to be, how a single moment can change absolutely everything, and how true friendship manifests itself precisely when glory, money, and crowded stands disappear. And be sure to watch this video to the end, because in the finale, you will learn a little-known fact about Maurice Stokes and the man who refused to leave him, even when it seemed there was almost no hope left. Maurice Stokes was born on June 17, 1933, in the small town of Rankin, Pennsylvania. His family lived very modestly, and soon his parents decided to move to Pittsburgh in hopes of finding more stable work and providing their children with a better future. Stokes' childhood could not be called easy, but it was in those years that the character began to form which later would be remembered by everyone who knew him. He was not used to complaining, worked hard on himself, and stood out from an early age with an amazing combination of strength, endurance, and calmness. When Maurice first seriously took up basketball, coaches almost immediately understood that they had an unusual player before them. Standing around 2 meters tall, he moved significantly faster than most tall basketball players of his time. He fought equally confidently under the basket, grabbed rebounds, initiated fast breaks, and could deliver a precise pass across the entire court. In an era when players were strictly divided by position, such abilities seemed a real rarity. While studying at Westinghouse High School, Stokes quickly became the team's main star. His physical power amazed opponents, but even more impressive was his game intelligence. He saw the court as if he knew in advance where partners and defenders would end up a few seconds later. Already back then, many experts said that this guy was capable of playing at a completely different level. However, basketball was far from the only sport in which he proved himself. Maurice successfully performed in track and field, participated in high jump and other discipline competitions, and also showed excellent results in American football. Such versatile preparation made him incredibly coordinated for a player of his dimensions. That is why, already in his youth, it became clear. An athlete was appearing before the basketball world who was capable of changing traditional ideas about what a big player should be like. Very soon, interest in Maurice went far beyond school tournaments. University coaches closely monitored his performances, fully understanding that the fight for such a basketball player would be serious. Ahead of him lay a new stage where he had to prove that school domination was only the beginning of a much more impressive story. Maurice's choice fell on St. Francis University in Pennsylvania. By the standards of that time, this was not a basketball giant that constantly remained in the center of nationwide attention. Many believed that by entering there, Stokes was depriving himself of part of his opportunities. But very soon it became clear. A real star cannot be hidden, no matter where she plays. From the very first seasons, he became the team's leader. His influence was felt literally in every ball possession. Maurice was not a player who cared exclusively about his own points. He fought equally selflessly for rebounds, found teammates with unexpected passes, managed to work in defense, and instantly initiated fast breaks. Today, a similar style would be called versatile basketball. But in the first half of the 1950s, such players were extremely rare. Each new season only strengthened his reputation. Stokes regularly ranked among the best players in college basketball, and his statistics looked impressive. He scored a large number of points, dominated under the boards, and became the most noticeable player on the court in practically every match. Opposing coaches built their defense specifically against him, but even this rarely brought the desired result. Experts were especially struck by the combination of physical data and basketball intelligence. Standing around 2 meters tall with a powerful build, Maurice moved so easily as if he were significantly shorter. He read the game magnificently, calculated the development of attacks in advance, and made decisions faster than most opponents. Many said that he was ahead of his time because he played basketball that would become familiar only decades later. Gradually, his name became known far beyond the conference. Scouts of NBA clubs came to St. Francis matches, fully understanding that they had a future professional of the highest level before them. By the end of college, almost no one doubted anymore that Stokes would definitely end up in the strongest league in the world. And the question was only, which team would first get the opportunity to choose this phenomenal player? In the summer of 1955, this moment finally arrived. The door to the NBA was opening for Maurice, a league where he had to prove that all enthusiastic assessments were fully deserved. No one assumed then that he would turn out to have agonizingly little time for this. In the summer of 1955, Maurice Stokes' dream became reality. He was chosen by the Rochester Royals club under the 2nd overall pick in the NBA draft. This choice alone spoke volumes. The team was confident that it was getting a player around whom a future could be built for years to come. But even the boldest expectations would soon seem too modest. The transition to professional basketball turned out to be surprisingly easy for Stokes. While many rookies spent months getting used to the speeds and toughness of the NBA, Maurice felt from practically his first matches as if he had been playing in this league for several seasons. He was not afraid of fighting more experienced opponents, acted confidently under the basket, and quickly became one of the team's key players. His statistics amazed even veterans. In his debut season, Stokes averaged 16.8 points and 16.3 rebounds per game. He became the best in the entire NBA in number of rebounds, and his contribution to the game went far beyond ordinary figures. He did not just finish attacks, but also created them, regularly dishing out passes, which was a real rarity for a power forward of those years. At the end of the season, Maurice deservingly received the NBA Rookie of the Year award. But even more important was something else. Experts had already begun saying that the league had received a completely new type of player. He could play equally effectively near the basket, handle the ball, organize the offense, and help teammates unlock their strengths. Today, no one is surprised by such qualities, but in the mid-50s, such versatility looked almost incredible. The next 2 seasons only confirmed that the success of the debut year was no accident. Stokes participated in the NBA All-Star Game 3 times in a row, and his figures continued to remain among the best in the league. Over the first 3 seasons, he totaled more than 4,000 rebounds, points, and assists combined, an achievement that practically no one had managed up to that point. Rochester Royals fans adored their leader, and opponents understood perfectly well that stopping Maurice alone was almost impossible. From the outside, it seemed that a long and brilliant career awaited him ahead. He was young, in magnificent physical shape, and already ranked among the strongest NBA basketball players. No one could suppose that very soon a single play would cross out all plans, and Maurice Stokes' name would forever become a symbol of one of the most tragic stories in world sports. In the spring of 1958, the season was coming to an end. For Maurice Stokes, this was already his 3rd year in the NBA, and he was once again playing it at the highest level. It seemed that new records, regular All-Star games, and the fight for the most prestigious individual awards lay ahead. But fate had already prepared a test that was impossible to foresee. On March 12, 1958, the Rochester Royals met the Minneapolis Lakers in the final match of the regular championship. During one of the attacks, Stokes rushed toward the basket, lost his balance, and fell at high speed, hitting his head hard against the parquet. The blow turned out to be so powerful that he lost consciousness right on the court for a few moments. Today, a similar incident would almost certainly lead to immediate medical examination and a lengthy recovery protocol. But in the 50s, the attitude toward such injuries was completely different. After Maurice came to his senses, he was helped up, and soon he returned to the game again. No one talked about possible consequences, and the basketball player himself was not going to leave the team at such an important moment of the season. 2 days later, the Royals played their first playoff game against the Detroit Pistons. Despite the recent fall, Stokes stepped onto the court again. He played the meeting to the end, fought for every ball, and, as always, spared no effort. From the outside, it seemed that the unpleasant incident was already behind them. Fans discussed the game, made predictions for the continuation of the series, and did not even suspect that this evening would become the last match in the professional career of one of the most talented players of his generation. When the team headed home, nothing portended trouble, but during the flight, Maurice suddenly felt unwell. His condition began to deteriorate rapidly. Just recently, he had confidently opposed the best basketball players in the world, and now he could no longer communicate normally with others. What at first looked like an ordinary concussion very quickly turned into a real fight for survival, and doctors soon faced a diagnosis that shocked not only the NBA, but the entire country. Upon returning home, Maurice Stokes' condition worsened before one's very eyes. At first, those around him decided that these were the consequences of a heavy blow to the head, but it very quickly became clear that something much more serious was happening. Soon, he needed urgent hospitalization. The young athlete who had spent hard minutes on the parquet just a few days ago now uttered words with difficulty and could barely control his own body. Doctors began examination and came to a heavy conclusion. Stokes had developed post-traumatic encephalopathy, complicated by damage to cerebral blood vessels. According to one of the most common versions, the blow received during the match triggered a chain of processes that led to irreversible consequences. In those years, medicine did not yet possess modern methods of diagnostics and treatment for such conditions, so the opportunities to help the athlete were significantly fewer than today. The illness progressed rapidly. In a matter of days, Maurice almost completely lost the ability to move independently. He found himself bedridden, and his speech became so impaired that communication turned into a huge problem. For a person who until recently was considered one of the physically strongest players in the NBA, this was an incredible test. The news instantly spread across the country. fans, journalists, and the basketball players themselves could not believe that the career of a 24-year-old star had ended so suddenly. Many players personally visited the hospital, hoping to see at least some signs of improvement. NBA teams raised funds to help with treatment, and newspapers published reports on Maurice's condition almost daily. But the hardest part turned out to be something else. It became clear very quickly that long years of struggle lay ahead of him, requiring constant care, expensive treatment, and enormous moral support. Most people in a similar situation gradually end up left entirely alone with their trouble. However, standing beside Stokes was a person who made the decision to completely change his own life for the sake of his friend. It is this action that later would be called one of the most noble in the history of world sports. This person turned out to be Jack Twyman. They were not childhood friends and not relatives. Basketball introduced them. For several seasons, they played together for the Rochester Royals, shared one locker room, trained together, and stepped onto the court. But no one could suppose that it would be Twyman who remained by his side when the majority could no longer help with anything. When it became clear that Maurice would need constant care and expensive treatment, Jack did not limit himself to words of support. He took on a responsibility that not everyone would dare to take. Twyman began organizing fundraising, contacted doctors, looked for the best rehabilitation options, and visited his teammate almost daily. Over time, he officially became Stokes' legal guardian, a step that for professional sports of that time was practically unprecedented. All treatment expenses were huge. Maurice's family could not cope with them on their own, so Twyman used his name and authority to attract public attention. He participated in charity events, communicated with journalists, and convinced people not to forget the basketball player whose life changed in just a few days. Thanks to these efforts, funds were raised that allowed treatment to continue and provided Maurice with decent care. Despite his severe condition, Stokes did not lose interest in what was happening around him. Over time, he was able to communicate again, although his speech remained heavily impaired. Those who visited him recalled that Maurice closely followed NBA games, took an interest in the results of his former team, and rejoiced at every visit from friends. Jack Twyman was especially often nearby. For him, this had long ceased to be an obligation. He simply could not abandon the person with whom he had once stepped onto the basketball court together. This friendship made a huge impression on the entire sports world. Players, coaches, and fans saw that true support does not end together with a career. When the bright lights of the arenas went out and thousands of spectators shifted their attention to new stars, Jack continued to come to Maurice again and again. It was thanks to him that Stokes' story ceased to be just a tale of tragedy. It turned into a story of human loyalty, which decades later is still called one of the strongest in NBA history. Years passed, but Maurice Stokes did not give up. Although the consequences of the illness changed his life forever, he continued to fight every day. Rehabilitation required enormous effort, and even the simplest actions were given with incredible difficulty. Thanks to constant classes with doctors and the support of loved ones, he managed to achieve small but very important progress. Over time, Maurice was able to communicate with others again. His speech remained slow and not always clear, but friends quickly learned to understand every word he uttered. Despite his severe condition, Stokes did not retreat into himself. He closely followed events in the basketball world, took an interest in the performances of former partners, and gladly met with those who came to visit him. Many recalled that his sense of humor and benevolence had not disappeared anywhere. Even finding himself in an extremely difficult situation, he tried to maintain dignity and never allowed others to see him as a person who had finally lost hope. Jack Twyman continued to stay nearby all these years. He helped solve everyday issues, organized treatment, accompanied Maurice to examinations, and did everything possible to make him feel like a full-fledged part of life, rather than a former athlete forgotten by everyone. Their friendship only grew stronger, and the story of the two teammates gradually went far beyond the basketball community. With each year, Stokes' body grew weaker. The consequences of brain damage continued to take their toll, and the medicine of that time could no longer change the situation. Nevertheless, Maurice lived for more than 12 years after that fateful match, showing an incredible strength of character. For many doctors, this in itself became an amazing example of resilience. On April 6, 1970, Maurice Stokes passed away. He was only 36 years old. For the NBA, this was a heavy loss, not only because the league lost one of the most talented players of his generation right at the very beginning of his path. His history forever reminded everyone how unpredictable life can be, and how important it is to value people who stay nearby in the most difficult moments. But even after his departure, Maurice's influence on basketball did not end. Over time, it became obvious that the memory of him would live much longer than his short career. Over time, Maurice Stokes' story ceased to be perceived only as one of the saddest pages in NBA history. It changed the league's attitude toward the players themselves. His case showed how important it is to provide assistance to athletes not only during their career, but also when they face difficult life trials. Years later, many club leaders and representatives of the basketball community admitted that it was Stokes' tragedy that forced a different look at issues of medical support and mutual assistance within the league. No less significant turned out to be Jack Twyman's legacy. His action became a symbol of true companionship that does not depend on contracts, popularity, or sports results. He did not just visit a former teammate. He dedicated a significant part of his life to ensuring that Maurice was not left alone. Thanks to the efforts of Twyman and many caring people, charity events in support of Stokes were held for many years, and their story became an example for several generations of athletes. Time gradually returned Maurice to deserved recognition. In 2004, his name was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. For many, this became a restoration of historical justice. After all, during his very short career, Stokes managed to participate in the NBA All-Star Game 3 times, entered the league's symbolic team for 3 consecutive seasons, and established statistical achievements that significantly ahead of their time. Many basketball historians still believe that, if not for the tragic circumstances, he could have become one of the greatest stars of his generation. The memory of the two friends was preserved not only in archival photographs and old matches. In 2013, the NBA established the annual Twyman-Stokes Teammate of the Year Award. It is received by players who show exceptional respect for partners, readiness to support the team, and selfless help to others. This is a rare case when a prestigious award is named immediately in honor of 2 people whose destinies intertwined forever thanks to basketball. Today, Maurice Stokes' name is remembered not only because of his outstanding play. His life became a reminder of how rapidly a person's destiny can change. And the story of the friendship between Maurice Stokes and Jack Twyman continues to inspire even decades later, proving that the greatest deeds are sometimes accomplished far beyond the basketball court. During his career, Maurice Stokes managed to play only 3 seasons in the NBA. For most players, this is only the beginning of a big path. But even this short time was enough to forever write his name into the history of basketball. He was a basketball player who was significantly ahead of his era. Tall, powerful, incredibly agile, and knowing how to score points equally well, collect rebounds, and create moments for partners. Many experts are sure that if his career had continued, today Maurice Stokes' name would sound next to the greatest players of his generation. But Stokes' main legacy turned out to be neither records nor individual awards. His story proved that the true value of sports is measured by more than just victories. When matches ended, arena crowd ovations disappeared and arena lights went out. A person remained by his side who did not seek glory for his action. Jack Twyman simply did not abandon a friend at the most difficult moment of his life. That is why, decades later, people remember their names together. And here is that very little-known fact that I spoke about at the beginning. When Maurice's condition stabilized slightly, doctors discovered that, despite almost complete immobility of the body, his intelligence and memory were practically unaffected. Over time, he learned to communicate using barely noticeable head movements, facial expressions, and very slow speech. Loved ones recalled that Stokes still followed basketball with interest, discussed games, recognized former partners, and even joked, although every uttered word required enormous effort. For many, this became a true miracle of human character strength. Maurice Stokes' story reminds us that life can change literally in a single instant. No one is capable of predicting what will happen tomorrow. But every person is capable of choosing what friend, what teammate, and what person they will remain in the most difficult times. That is why more than half a century later, the basketball world continues to remember not only the great player Maurice Stokes, but also the incredible friendship that proved stronger than any trials. And perhaps this is precisely where his greatest legacy lies.